Good afternoon, students. This is our first lecture on records management, INFS 331. Though many of you have not signed on today, but I'm still going to start teaching because we have only 6 weeks to do this course, and we have some number of slides, as you have seen, as it's already been posted to you. So, records management, as the name goes, simply deals with how institutions manage their records. So we'll go through some sessions. The first session has to do with more or less definitions, records, and records management. But you will find session objectives, the objectives of this session, that after completing this session, you, the student, should be able to define and explain what a record is. Explain the qualities and properties of records. List some uses of records and explain what they use the records for. Distinguish between the two types of records. Explain the 4 main characteristics of records. I'm marking essays written on records management questions by distance education students. What I observed is that even with the slides, putting their language together, their grammar and other things is a problem. Though the course outline indicates when continual assessment exams will be given, depending on certain circumstances, numbers of class and the rest, I may decide to give you an essay also for your first continual assessment. So you should read through your slides carefully. Don't expect that everything will be multiple choice questions. There could be essay along the line. And I made reference to the D students because I find that the issue about what a record is people write records is, and then they say record is just simple English. Instead of using records are, or what a record is, they do those petty mistakes. I hope you will not make those mistakes. So we should be able to list some uses of records and explain what they use the records for. And also distinguish between the two types of records, explain the 4 main characteristics of records. Now, let's look at some definitions of records. What are records? Records come in a variety of formats. Let's look at the formats first. We have paper records, correspondence, minutes, reports, memoranda, registered notebooks, cartographic records, those drawings that people do, architectural and engineering records or drawings. Then we have raw microfilm, such as photograph prints, negatives, transparencies, and x-rays. And then we have electronic records, such as audiovisuals, online databases, multimedia, etc. Now, the International Council on Archives, which is an international body dealing with the management of records all over the world, defines a record as recorded information produced or received in the initiation, conduct, or completion of an institutional or individual activity. And that comprises content, context, and structure sufficient to provide evidence of the activity. Let's break down the definition. The definition by the ICA simply makes reference to the fact that a record is recorded information. Information is abstract. I'm speaking to you. I'm providing information. Until you record it as it's being recorded, or you write it down from what I'm saying, it's just information. But the moment you record it, you capture it on a medium, whether electronic or paper-based, it becomes a record. And that is so because at any point you'll be able to make reference to it. It becomes tangible. Without recording, it remains what it is, abstract. But the moment you record it, you capture it onto a medium. Recording means you are capturing it onto a medium. The moment you do that, you convert it into recorded information. It becomes a record. So recorded information produced or received in the initiation, conduct, and completion of an institutional or individual activity. So any activity that You initiate, you start, you do, conduct, you carry out as you go along, and you, at point of completion of the institutional or individual activity, and that comprises content. For every record to claim to be a record, there are certain states that you must find in there. And the first is content, the second is context, and then the third is structure. Content has to do with the message. What is a message? That is it relevant to the issue at stake? If it's a contract, the content, does it reflect the contract? What is being said? Currently, we are having lectures with you. So I'm discussing the topic which is relevant to the topic, the course, records management. I'm looking at a record because you have two main terms, record management. And so we want to look at what a record means. So content. Context is the environment within which the information is being recorded. And that, in this case, it is a lecture. So that is a context. University of Ghana, City Campus students who are offering records management. And so that is within the context. It can be an organization, and you have a it can be an organization, and the organization will provide the environment or the context within which records are captured. And then structure. Structure has to do with format. This one is a recording, more or less electronic records. There you can have paper-based and others. Those are to provide the evidence of the activity. As we go along, you understand what the evidence aspect has to. There are other definitions of records. The National Standard Organization, ISO 15489, which defines a record as information created, received, and maintained as evidence by an organization or person in the transaction of a business or in the pursuance of legal obligation, regardless of media. So information that is created, received, and maintained as evidence of whatever transaction has taken place. What is being recorded, whether by hand by you or through Zoom recording, is a record is going to serve as evidence that I had this lecture at this time, and so I had this lecture at this time, and this is what I said, what I discussed with, or supposed to discuss with you students. Those who are tying, please don't make any noise. This is being recorded, so no noise. If you have anything to say, you can send a chat message through the chat. Those who are coming on board, don't turn on your system, mute your system. Now, one of the key words in this definition is transactions, and this is because the records themselves form a part of or provide evidence of such transactions. When we're talking about transactions, we are looking at business transactions, corporate transactions, person to an individual to an organization, organization and organization. You have transactions that you have been dealing with. University of Ghana, you pay your fees, you get communication, you take examination and all that sort of thing. You get your results reported. These are all transactions, and the records serve as evidence of the transactions. And then a record implies evidence written down and retained so that it can be read and assessed again. And that helps you to know what has transpired. Now, let's look at the properties and qualities of records. Now, properties of records. To serve their purpose of providing reliable evidence, records must possess three key properties, which I've already explained, but inherent in all the records: content, context, and structure. Content refers to the information or data held in the record. Context in terms of being capable of ascertaining how a record relates to other records and to the organization which created it. So when I talk about your relationship within the university, your admission letters and other things, your academic record, there's some relationship existing between them. Admission letter offered you admission. If you apply for residence, the residence will letter, whatever form or letter that came out of it shows that you have been allocated a room. and a bed and other things. So there's that relationship to the university. And it also indicates what activity led to the creation of that record, and that it was authorized, and to the organization which created it. Then structure refers to the forms of formats, the forms of format that the forms of formats that records take. And as I said, it could be electronic or it could be manual or paper-based records. When we move from the properties, we talk about qualities of records. For a record to say or claim to be a record, there are certain qualities that it must have. Now, records in both paper and electronic form should be first comprehensive. A record should be created for every transaction for which evidence is required. If evidence is not required, then there's no need for you to create or record it. A record should be created for every transaction for which evidence is required. And as we have already seen from the beginning, a record can come in the form of audio recording. The films you watch, these are all records. The music you listen to, these are all records. The photographs you see or you take, these are all records. What you write, the newspapers and the rest, these are all records. So records come in all forms and formats, but they all contain information relating to an activity and recorded for the sake of what we normally refer to as reference. So a record must be comprehensive. It should be created for every transaction for which evidence is required so that it will capture the essence of the transaction. Accurate, a record should accurately document the transaction that gave rise to it. Thus, the record should contain the information necessary to provide evidence of the transactions it documents. So a record should accurately document the transaction that gave rise to it. That's why when you go to meetings, minutes are taken. That is a way of documenting what is happening at the meeting. And the next time the committee or the group meets, they go through the minutes, make all the corrections necessary. Somebody moves for the minutes to be adopted. And once it becomes adopted, it becomes a record of the meeting, a record of the meeting. And it means that whatever is captured in the minutes shows what transpired at that particular meeting. And every meeting, there will be a new record created. So a record should accurately document the transaction that gave rise to it. What led to the creation of that record should be documented. So in the case of meetings, attendance may be invited by letter of invitation to a meeting or an appointment or other, can be text messages, can be by audio. All this should be captured to show why that meeting was held and the documentation that came out of it. Thus, the record should contain the information necessary to provide evidence of the transactions it documents. The third one is complete and meaningful. A record should include sufficient information about the context in which it was created and used, about its structure and about its linkages to other records. This complete and meaningful is tied to the structure. As we saw in the properties, the record should include sufficient information about the context in which it was created and used, about its structure, and about its linkages to other records. Understandable and usable, it should be possible to extract from the record the information it contains and is intended to convey without any loss of information. So this more or less like an abstract. When people write thesis, among the first pages, you find what is called abstract. The abstract documents, it's an extraction of key points of the essay or the thesis that gives a bird's eye view of what the thesis was all about. So when you have a document, it should be possible to extract complete information out of it and use without necessarily having any problems, or loss of information when you carry out that extraction. And that is why it should be comprehensive. It should be related to the issue at stake that sort of thing. And then compliant. A record should comply with any regulatory and accountability requirements that apply to the organization that created it. Most organizations, if not all well-established organizations, have forms or ways of creating their records, carrying out their activities. So you go to some organization, they will tell you that all official letters should be on official letterhead. Even the form that you write a letter, there are certain ways of doing it. And you find that everybody who writes a letter. So you can get a letter from such an organization and you can tell, if you are familiar with the way they write their letters, that this is really coming from the organization. So a record should comply with any regulatory accountability requirement that apply to the organization that created it. For accountability, for instance, financial issues, there are international standards on how to capture certain financial dealings, but organizations too can have their own way of going about doing it. Unique to that organization, it means that a record that documents such issues, such transactions, should follow that organization's rules or regulations. I hope you are with me so far. As I said, when I'm having these lectures, you can send questions if you have any through the chat facility, so that we will attempt coming out with any that you have. Thomas came online and said there was no lectures today. I asked him why he hasn't come back again, so I don't know. I'm sure he's gone. As of now, 11 people signed on, which is good. I know City Campus the first week, you take it that there are no lectures. Well, we are not having synchronous lectures. I'm recording this. I'll get it across to you. I already shared my slides, and I'm share screen in the slides here too. So it will help you if you join the class live like this. That's if you have the means to. Now the next topic, the third topic, has to be users of records. So who are the users of records? I'm sure you yourself, you know some users of records. Governments need well-managed records to uphold the rule of law. You go to court, you don't just go and speak. You go with evidence. The evidence can be audio recording, it can be on paper. You're fighting over land, you have to send your indenture side plan. If you have title to it, registration, title, registered land, you have to send the documentation and all that. So for the government, for the rule of law to be upheld, we need records. And that is why when there's an election going to take place, the government causes new voters register to be compiled so that those who have attained the age of 18 can also be registered so they don't lose their franchise for voting, which is their right. When you go to court, you go through the processes. There are rules guarding procedures at court. You have to go through all those rules, to be accountable and to ensure the interests of citizens are protected. So now there's a Right to Information Act that has been passed to give the citizens the right to have access to information, though not all records will be made or information will be made accessible to the citizenry. Some are protected, and then to protect the citizen. So governments need records, well-managed records, and that's why we have a whole law, Act 535, the Public Records and Archives Administration Act 535, passed in 1997, that vests the management of all public records in the hands of the Public Records and Archives Administration Department, PRAD. So that is to make sure that the records are managed well and made available as and when it's needed to make the necessary decisions, and then to ensure accountability, transparency, and probity. Then executives, when you go to workplaces, your bosses, members of management, they all use records. executives need records to enable them formulate policies and make accurate decisions. Action officers, when you complete university and you go to the MDAs and other organizations, you work as executive officers, you can work as action officers. They are the ones who take action on whatever comes from their immediate superiors, to get some draft, to prepare some draft and other things. That is action officer. Action officer need records to implement policies, deliver services to citizens, and manage resources. Auditors, we having cases of the Auditor General going to certain technical universities and other public institutions. That is what it does. Go to audit all their incomes and expenditures. And if it finds any anomalies, reports them. And this is sent to Parliament. And Parliament, through its Public Accounts Committee, looks at the audited accounts. And if there are any people who need to be sanctioned, they get sanctioned. If it is to repay some money that they have misappropriated or embezzled, that is done. So auditors need records to be able to carry out their work in assessing the incomes and expenditures, how incomes that were given out to these institutions or allotted through budget and others were spent, how they were spent. And then citizens need records to ensure that their rights and interests are protected and to enable them make an informed contribution to the governing process. So you want to help in the governing process, you want to make a case, you need to get the requisite records to be able to make your case. If somebody is building on unauthorized place or somebody is building on a waterway and other things, you may be concerned. You don't just go and protest. You look for the necessary documentation that shows that the building plan in this location shows that this is a waterway and there should be no building over there. So you go to the assembly and you go to the planning department and you tell them you want information to do with this issue. And if they have it, they give it to you. You can use that to go and fight, so that that structure doesn't come and cause flooding when it rains. Historians and researchers need records as evidence of what happened in the past, to be able to write what they write, their articles and write their books and the rest. Communities need permanently preserved records to enable today's society to connect with the past. So you know how a community came to be where it was or where it is, why there are certain festivals and activities that a community can engage in, why there are certain taboos. These all date back to certain practices or happenings in the events in the past. And this could be documented. Where they are documented, you need to make sure that you refer to them. And employers rely on records to provide core information for conducting their businesses. Why it should be promoted. There's appraiser, so they have to look at the appraisal results. They have to look at your certificates that you use in going to work. They have to look at other sources, other records to get information, trainings, that programs you have gone, you participated in, how well you participated in those events and the rest. This will all provide information to employers. And even whether to employ, who to employ, how many to employ. All these are issues that records provide information that you can use to make such decisions. Ombudsmen need records to determine whether or not decisions and actions have been taken equitably. An ombudsman, an institution in Ghana that you can equate to an ombudsman, is a SHRAG, Commission for Human Rights and Administrative Justice. SHRAG can be seen to be an ombudsman, more like an independent body that looks at certain issues. SHRAG was set up to look at human rights and administrative issues, where the courts may not determine the cases, or one does not want to send such a case to the court. You can send it to SHRAG and they will look at it and determine whether you have any merit or demerits. Now, the fourth topic has to do with the types of records. For type of records, What I dealt with here mainly has to do with what we call public records and private records. That is all. There are only these two. Public records are records created, received, and maintained by government agencies or institutions within the public sector. University of Ghana is a public institution. It generates a lot of records. As a result, it has even set up a unit called the University of Ghana Archives. And this is a unit that is helping to manage University of Ghana records, both the current and then the ones that are archives, the old records. So the university has set up this unit that might help to manage. Ministry departments and agencies also are public institutions, and the records they generate are all public records. Now, we say public institutions because these institutions were set up by government, by law, and they are more or less funded, resourced through budgetary allocations. So, and the budget or the funds, the funds that go through the budget, these are by funds that are allocated through the budget and gotten from the general public. So it's the general public that pay taxes, and the taxes end up being used to fund government projects. And so we say these are public records. The records that are generated by staff working per their schedules and generating these records. Now, when we come to private records, we're talking about records created, received, and maintained by non-government institutions, families, and individuals relating to their affairs. The funding for managing private records, even the creation of private records, is by the institution and the individuals involved. So shareholders. In the case of public institution and public records, the shareholders of public institution, you can say, are the citizenry. So they are the shareholders. And so they provide the funds. In the case of private institution, the shareholders are private individuals. They provide the capital, and the capital lead to the creation of the record, because that's what they use in setting up the institution. And they employ people, and the people, by virtue of their work, records are generated. In some of the definitions, one thing that happens is that we look at records as byproducts of transactions. Records as byproducts of transactions, and they serve as evidence of the transaction. That is where the evidence of transaction comes. They are byproducts. When we say that a record is a byproduct of transactions, what it simply means that the main reason why you had that transaction was not to create a record. You wanted admission to the University of Ghana. The University of Ghana published its processes for admission and said, go online, but first of all, go to the bank, buy a voucher. The voucher will give you a PIN and serial number. Go to the university website. You will see a link. Enter your, you see fields, enter your PIN and your serial number. It will lead you to other places. And that is how you ended up registering the university. All these are records, right from the form you entered, indicating that you wanted a voucher, which the teller in the bank received, checked. You did it in duplicate, or some cases even triplicate. You were given a duplicate. The bank kept the original. A record was generated or created. All the process, you were given a voucher. It contained information. That's a record. You could, if you wanted to file records dealing with your stay in the university up to your level 300, all this should go onto your file, whether electronic, by scanning them onto a folder, or paper-based by putting them in a paper folder. These are all records. Now, all these records have been generated, and this semester, I'm sure you have paid fees, gone through the same process. You have been given copies or gone online and pay fees, whichever it is. Even if it's online, even if it is through mobile money, you still got a test sent to you by the service operator indicating that you have paid this amount of money. It's been taken out of your balance, and This is your transactional code and all those things. So all those things are there. So the timetable has not changed. As far as I'm concerned, I have a lecture from 2:30 to 4:30 for records management. Is it Wednesday? Tuesday? Somebody says the records management is on Wednesday. Is it?
Records management is on Wednesday.
Wednesday.
Is the person main campus or city campus? For city campus is Tuesday.
What I'm doing is city campus.
Main campus is Wednesday.
What I'm doing currently is city campus, and city campus is Tuesday. And this is a period for city campus. Yes, you are in main campus. I'm not doing main campus, I'm doing city campus. So Wednesday is for main campus. Okay. So records serve as evidence of transactions. They serve as evidence of transactions. And they are byproducts, as I have explained, because that is not the purpose for which the transaction. As I said, people go to meetings, and when they go to meetings, the minutes are taken. The minutes serve as evidence of the meeting, but actually what the meeting went to do was to have a meeting and discuss issues. But to be able to show that a meeting took place to discuss those issues, there should be a report, and the report is the minutes that is taken. So that is, by the way, as part of the definition. Now, characteristics of records. For any document to be accepted as evidence of an activity or transaction, it must have all these four characteristics. The first is static. Records created must be fixed and not be susceptible to change. As I said along the line, when you go to a meeting and minutes are captured, the next sitting, that minutes is captured. Whatever is on it is there. The next meeting, this minutes is reproduced. Corrections are made, adopted, and then accepted as the correct minutes of the meeting. But that doesn't mean that the previous one is thrown away. No, that will be there. That is more like a draft, the draft of the minutes. And then this is the original approval, the corrections to be made, and they will all be filed to show, you know. So, and once that is done, unless the same committee sits and decide to change anything in the minutes remains like that for life. You cannot, the moment one or two people go to do anything with it, to alter anything or claim to update it, they have tampered with the minutes and it's no more. So when we say static, that is what it is. The certificates you got from the BEC, the WASI, and the one you get from the university, they are all static documents. You can't tamper with it. You are not even to perforate them. You know, you don't have to do anything to them. If the content of a record is manipulated in some way or tampered with, it no longer provides evidence of the transaction it originally documented. And that is why when it is found that you have faked any document or a document has been faked, it's rejected as evidence. You cannot use it as evidence. It's just, you may even be arrested for presenting a fake document. So we have to be careful when we talk about documents and we say they are authentic. If they are authentic, then they should show that they are authentic. The next characteristic is authority. Records should be created under authority that can be proved. So the University of Ghana has one certificate, hard copy, that will be given to you. There's no duplicate. If you misplace it or lose it, and you have to prove that you have misplaced it, you'll be given a letter of attestation. The university doesn't even keep any hard copy for it to make duplicates for you. And how do you prove that this is a genuine University of Ghana certificate? You can always make reference to the university. So when you present a copy of certificate to that employer, that institution that wants to employ you, know that they can make reference to the university for confirmation that the certificate you are presented is genuine. It's not a fake one. So authority. The university is authorized under the University of Ghana Act to train people, students, and issue them with certificates. So it has authority to issue that certificate. Records provide official evidence of the activity or transaction they document. Signatures, letterheads, seals, and office stamps are obvious indicators of the official nature of records. So you take a letter from somewhere. These are some of the features you want to see to show that, yes, this is an authorized document. Authorized. If it's not authorized, then it doesn't carry the weight that it's supposed to carry. And then unique. Records should be maintained in the appropriate context because they were generated during a particular transaction or business process. You work on a schedule. You are opening accounts, for students of the University of Ghana who come to the university and they want to have bank accounts. When they come, there's a format that you go through. There are forms they will complete, and the customer relations officer will also complete some aspect. There are other people within the institution, the branch, who will complete their parts. So, and these are filed as more or less first come, first served basis. So there's that relationship, and that relationship should be maintained, because it explains the first record. So when you have files that are put in volumes, volume 1, volume 2, volume 3, volume A, volume B, you find that there's a relationship. Sometimes you are looking for some material on volume A or volume 1. You can't find it. You take volume 2 and you find it there, because volume 1 got full and they open a second one and they put that item there. So records should be maintained in the appropriate context because they were generated during a particular transaction or business process. And so you shouldn't mix them up. The moment you mix them up, you tell the story changes. And for this reason, there should be only one original copy of every record. When it comes to records management, you can have duplicate copies. Today it's even easier. Scanned copies can look like original, but there's always one original copy. The others are all duplicates. Authenticity. Authentic. A record is authentic if it can be verified. It must be possible to prove that records are what they say they are. So your University of Ghana certificate purports to be an official certificate given to you by the University of Ghana. Anybody who has doubt can always verify. A record is authentic if it can be verified. How do you verify? Send a copy of the certificate or the original certificate to the University of Ghana that issued the certificate, and let the university certify that really this is the certificate issued to you and that you qualify to be issued that certificate. So, ladies and gentlemen, some of you may be working, some may go to work, seek work for work. When you go, the employing authority may ask you to bring your original certificates to the interview, though you may have sent certified copies. They want to compare the two. They want to be satisfied that really. They may even take scanned copies of the original you present. But mind you, all original documents, unless by court of law, should remain in your custody. So never send out your original certificate to anybody. You can always go to the university for the university to make a copy and certify it for such purposes. But if the court of law wants the original, it will go through certain processes to make sure that nothing happens to your certificate and it's released to you at the end of the whole process. So that is authentic. So this is the first session. I'm going to sum up. In this session, you have learned that a record serves as evidence in the transaction of business or in pursuance of legal obligations, and that public records are created and received by MDAs. The MDAs stand for ministry, departments, and agencies, while private records are created by private individuals. Some users of records include government, researchers, auditors, employers, action officers, etc. Static, authority, unique, and authentic are the characteristics of a record. Thank you. There are some references. These days you can also go online and you find some more references. Find more references that you can fall on. Today is Tuesday. We had this. I think the next one is on Thursday. So we'll meet on Thursday. As I said, if you have any questions whilst I'm making the presentation, or even after the presentation, you can send a question by chat forum, and I will have it, and then we'll discuss it as we go along. Thank you.
You don't have any questions?